Welcome to the Waggle Room. When honeybees return to the hive, they perform a waggle dance, not to give answers, but to share signals, direction, distance, quality and possibility. Many dances can happen at once, different options, different signals, all moving through the colony together. Over time, patterns form, attention shifts, some signals fade, others gather momentum, and a way forward begins to emerge. Humans do this too, in groups, communities, in moments of uncertainty, long before anything feels clear or settled. The Waggle Room is a space to notice those signals, explore the systems they sit within, and make sense of what's emerging. Signals, systems, sense-making.
So welcome to the Waggle Room, everybody. As usual, this is where we're going to come, try and explore some signals. Today, I'm over the moon. I've got Chris on the Waggle Room. I'll hand over to him in a minute to give him a bit of background. But one of the things we spoke about in our pre-chat was a lot around funny odd things, signals, vibrations, communication, leadership. Chris and I have known each other a long time, but the interesting thing is we've known each other from the military, but we didn't actually serve together. But we sort of kept bumping into each other. And since we both left the military through mutual friends, we've stayed in contact. And Chris is doing some really interesting stuff. He's become a children's author, which is amazing. My kids have read his book, which we'll go into in a little bit. Chris, I'll hand over to you and give us a bit of an intro and background, mate, if that's all right.
Well, thank you, Mick. Yes, and as I said, you've had some great guests on your podcast thus far. So I'm hoping to at least come up to the sort of bottom of their level, which we'll see. But yes, so yes, we have known each other for a long time and sort of the crossing of paths, etc. But we're here now and it's about sharing knowledge and experience. So hopefully I can add a little bit to the Waggle Room. So, I did 27 years in the military, predominantly with the commando engineers. And then after that, I started a small holding in North Devon where I was raising Exmoor sheep and used a horse in terms of woodland management. So utilizing animals. And interestingly to you, as you already know, I had some bees as well that were inherited along the way. So I got a lot of experience there. That was going along quite nicely. And I had an accident. Where I damaged my arm really badly and got pneumonia, which was part of the shock of it afterwards. And then things changed and I had to get a full-time job, which then in the mental side of things sort of started to sort of have a bit of a wobble. I'd been in the military a long time, going away, at home working, home every day, and then having to go away again just wasn't what I was looking for. And things started to go a little bit sort of south. And eventually I was introduced to the coaching conversation in terms of how to get out of the situation. And from that moment, I was a convert to the coaching conversation. I'd had therapeutic conversations, which were looking backwards, but the coaching conversation was about looking forwards. You're here. What are you going to do? Action. How am I going to get out of this hole? What am I going to do? How am I going to improve? So I initially started a company called the Resolution Coaching Company, which was about veterans and serving military officers about coaching to sort of get better. What is it I want to do? But in terms of organizations, the uptake in terms of mental well-being coaching wasn't what I'd hoped, and therefore had to pivot back out of there into the leadership style of coaching, which was more lucrative and has formed a lot of where I am right now in terms of what I'm going forward and what I'm doing. So in a broad brush, that's effectively where I am now after a quick sort of run through.
Brilliant. I mean, we both have like you said, we've both got a military background. And I think we probably both agree that the military is very, very good at some things and not so good at other things. And that's fine because that's life. But what did those days in the military teach you about what you could possibly take into, even when you started getting into the farming, Chris, and then into the coaching? What lessons did you draw on from those sort of years that you spent in the military?
Well, I do think that, well, it's on record, actually. I think that the military is one of the largest UK training providers there are. And leadership and management training is built in at each level. I think that in terms of that training experience, or giving sort of space to try out certain things on command courses, really did change and elevate sort of thinking, which is now one of my main sort of topics, thinking about what is next. How am I going to get myself out of this hole, or what am I going to improve at? So I think in terms of the military side of things was the training side, but also the fun. We had a hell of a lot of fun really along the way, which obviously we can't talk about that sort of thing, but there is that fun side of it. And I think sometimes we miss, in terms of business, you miss that fun element where you can, don't want to say get away with murder, because that's probably the wrong thing into the current context, but you can have great fun with like-minded people who all, in terms of sort of mission, objectives, purpose, we have that at the top. We're all moving towards that, which I think with the experience of business now, sometimes that is lacking, and therefore the direction, the encouragement for that singular aim, objective, purpose, task, solution, whatever it is missing. And sometimes that they miss out on that, which I'm glad I've had that experience.
Yeah, 100%. It's funny in work. Obviously, I do a lot of stuff around AI, and one of the phrases I sort of use to people is, because people constantly want to be given answers. How do I prompt? How do I use these things? What I started saying to people is, you need to play with it, right? And then there are a lot of people were pushing back against that. Oh, play. Oh, well, it's a bit of a childish word. You're like, no, that's actually how we sort of learn. So yeah, this and play is fun. So, and I like you, the awesome times that we all had doing that.
Yeah.
I think one of the things in the military, which is a bit of a misconception as well, is you get on with people, but you have different levels of friendship. I would say one of the things that resonated when you were speaking there is, you may not necessarily get on with everyone at the same level, but when there's a task to be done or a mission to be completed, or if there's somebody that you didn't actually get on with, but you would put your almost literally life on the line to help them, which I find a fascinating thing that maybe is a little bit missing outside of the military sometimes.
Yeah. Well, you call that a collective purpose. What are we, in terms of that, we know where we're going. If we set off in the car and we had a map and we weren't too sure where we were going, we'd probably get a little bit confused along the way, probably have a few arguments along, and effectively that's what mirrors in business. We need to have that roadmap. People need direction. Humans need that support in helping them, where we come back to resistance to change. Why do we like change? My God, I don't know what's around the corner. And that is the sort of thing. But I think collective purpose is an underutilized sort of phrase. I don't think I mentioned this before, but there's a professor that comes to the business school where I do a little bit of work, is that he talks about slide 1, slide 2. And in slide 1, slide 2, whenever you have a meeting or a presentation, slide 1 goes up, and that is the organization's purpose, objective, aim, whatever that is. Slide 2 is our department's aim, purpose within slide 1. So we're constantly reminding people why we are here.
Yeah.
And so that's another way to reinforce what are we actually here to do. And I think slide 1, big picture of the organization. Slide 2, our little bit within it.
That sort of leads on to, the whole mission command concept in the military. So, yeah, do you use any of that type of, I mean, it may not be the same sort of language, but any of that type of learning to put across to people?
Yeah, Yeah, look, and I do. Just before we do that, just an upfront agreement, and all your sort of viewers and listeners, that I do wander around quite a lot. I do have trouble standing still, and my thinking pose is back down through the windows, back down towards the house. So the screen hasn't frozen. I'm thinking. All right. Just as an upfront agreement. Okay, so mission command. Now, I run a little exercise about it, but it's very much utilizing the military context of mission command and then flipping it over to business. And it's if you imagine, and let's just go through a little scenario, what I would use, and maybe some of your listeners will recognize, is that if we were in a military context, we would, for a mission, for a team or whatever it is, a section troop, we would create like a patrol lane. So I'm trying to simplify it as best for everybody to. And at the beginning, you'd have the line of departure where we're starting. You'd have a limit of exploitation. Don't go any further than this.
Yeah.
You don't go any further left because we've got another team over here. We don't go any further right of arc because we've somebody over there. So we're creating a box. So we're a patrol lane. And in that patrol lane, we are giving as much information at the beginning to get them to the end, either military orders process. We're giving them all the information we have to get to the end. And then at certain points in that patrol lane, they're going to be feeding information back to us in the headquarters. What have they seen on the ground? What have they encountered? And they're going to be sending that information back until they move up the map to the limit of exploitation, wherever the objective is. And so within that, in the orders process, we know that soldiers they're trained to listen. They know what information is coming in what order. But also in there of great importance is the actions on, for one thing, which are in the civilian world, we'd call it I call it the open door policy. If this happens, you come and knock my door down straight away. Some people say, "Ooh, what's your open door policy?" They say, "My door's always open." And then why does somebody put a couple of zeros in the wrong place and they don't come and tell us? Because we haven't reinforced what that open door policy is. A couple of zeros in the wrong place, you knock that door down. You have problems with getting to the objective, you tell me immediately. And so in terms of creating that box, and the intention is to make the box strong so they have the freedom to move within it. I'm not overseeing what they're doing. I'm letting them get on with it. I've given you all the information I know. The other parts in there about those report lines. You just come back and tell me what you've seen. And being specific. In the military, we would have certain features because obviously we can't, in terms of grid lines, we have certain features we go by. But in civilian work or activity, we could include time. Mick, Friday, 12 o'clock, come back and give me what you've seen, problems you've encountered, successes. And that way we're feeding that information back to the headquarters, or you, if you like, which are effectively these patrol lanes in civilian business context are what they would call silos. And the professor that I do some work with, silos for 20 years have been saying we must break silos.
Yeah.
We think silos are very good. The problem has been managing silos. And that is where, in terms of the mission command model, where we can have a number of silos, patrol lanes, feeding information back to us. What does that information mean to me? What have I got to do with it? Okay, I've got one team here excelling, one team here lagging behind a bit. What is this team doing that this team isn't? Sounds very simple, but we don't do it. And that comes back in terms of when we get on to communication. So we've overcomplicated everything and we're not doing the basics. We've forgotten the basics. We're trying to sort of sprint. And in terms of that mission command part, here we just let them. Silos are good, but just all I want in return is for you to tell me what you're doing. What successes work, what has been difficult this week, because potentially somebody over here is experiencing the same. And so what am I going to do? Collaborate. For me, I can tell them, or get them to go and sit with them, tell them how they overcome that situation. And so it's very much that collaboration part of problem solving, which mentioned earlier on, we didn't, but I thought about it, was the test and learn methodology. So we're testing, or I don't like the word failure, but we're testing something. We come against a dead end, or we can't go any further with it. What did I learn on the way? I'm stuck. Okay, I'm going to come back. I'm going to try something else. Yeah, so that learning is valuable to everybody. But if I don't tell somebody, then it's going nowhere. So it's that gathering of information from all the silos or teams, that could be individuals or teams working to better inform me, the knowledge and experience I'm getting. What do I got to do with it?
Yeah.
So I think in broad brush or sort of quick action there, the intention is when you draw it out and then they see a picture. So you've got the military sort of sketch map, and then you put it across just some oblong shapes, and then they put names at the bottom. Okay, this is Tilly, Tom, and Tiny. And then I'm building in the what is it I want them to do, objective at the end, creating the time, how long. And that again could be a week, month, 6 months, depending on the activity. And again, the other part of that, which I think people are worried about, is that, well, I've got a new team here. Well, all I do is build in more report lines with that team. So I have more communication with them to establish. So I don't want them to fail, but I want them to learn and test and learn. I don't want to give them the answers all every time, because then that restricts their thinking. And if we condition them for me to tell them the answer all the time, they're not going to think. So it's really giving them the opportunity to think, to overcome the problem in front of them. We want people that can solve problems, not bring us problems.
Yeah, there's loads of stuff in there. So the feedback loop thing, I didn't even, it's not until you get out really, you sort of understand, or you start to understand what goes on in the military. It's like you said, this sort of leadership management, obviously it's talked about, but it's ingrained in everything you sort of do. Every level you go, every course you go on, every rank you get, it's ingrained. And even thinking back to like you being a section under a poncho in the rain in the woods where the section commander's giving the orders, and what does the section commander do to the people that he's giving the orders to? At the end of every part of the orders process, he asks questions and gets responses.
Yeah. Well, let's take that a little bit further. The first bit I want to sort of pick you up on is you use the word feedback loop. I am on a bit of a mission to change the word feedback. We could do a little exercise now. Let's do a little exercise, and people at home can sort of play along. I'm going to say 2 phrases, and then you tell me which one made you feel more likely to respond. Okay?
Yeah.
Mick, I'd love to give you some feedback on that presentation you've just given. Number 1. Number 2, Mick, I'd love to share some observations on that presentation you've just done. Which one sounds better? Which one would you react more to?
The second one sounds better, because as soon as you say to somebody, I'm going to give you some feedback, that feedback could be positive or negative. But us being humans, we go to, God, that's going to be negative feedback.
Yeah. So in terms of our language, what we say, what does the other person hear? And in terms of that word, feedback is just such a, even if we're told, right, you've got to say all the positive ones first, bring out your negative feedback, and then finish with a positive. That's where, if we just say, look, these are my observations. This is what I've seen. This is what I've heard. This is what I feel. It has more meaning to the person.
Yeah.
They are tuned to listen.
Well, no. It's interesting you use the word observe, right? Because I've got somebody coming on, which who I've known for a while. A guy called Mark McGrath. He was in the US Marines actually, and he does a lot of work with John Boyd's work, but with the OODA loop. And the first part of the OODA loop is observe. So that even you using that word, it's in a lot of things that already exist. And you're right, it does make a huge difference.
Yeah, and I've used the OODA loop a couple of times in conversations with clients in terms of rapid decision making, that sort of observation, orientation, direction, action. And then what am I going to do? It comes back to, communication in terms of what am I going to do? What do I see? What do I hear? What am I going to do about it? And that is moving to the action part. Without action, nothing goes forward. Anyway,
Yeah.
sorry, just go back on that other part. The original question you asked me was in terms of summary or asking questions. Now, when we ask people are frightened to ask questions.
Yeah.
And one of the subjects that comes up a lot in I've been told I need to get better at storytelling. I think in terms of the military context, that summary of execution is a good example of that.
Mm.
I'm telling a story of exactly everything that I've told you. The detail, I'm just going to tell you a story. Going to from A to B, we're going to meet up with C, we're going to have tea and biscuits, and then we're going to go back there. But I think in terms of the questions thing, which is linked to communication, sorry if I'm rambling and going all over the place.
No, this is good.
Is that questions or paraphrasing for people is something we don't do enough of. And again, this is part of that basic communication. How do I know you have understood what I've said? Normally, when I ask that question, we sort of talk about verbal and non-verbal communication. The non-verbal part, actions. Whenever I ask a question, people always talk about themselves. Well, I shouldn't stand like this and I need to be engaged. We never think about the other person. What do I see that other person? Is he shuffling around a bit? Is he sort of a bit agitated? We never actually say what we see in that sort of part of communication. And so the other part, sorry, let me give you an example of that. I like to give examples. And in terms of saying what I see, I could say something like, you're looking a bit agitated. Is it better that we do this tomorrow? And just by saying that to the person, we're giving them the option. Yeah, there's, the wife's burnt the evening meal of it. I need to get home and sort of, but if we don't give them the option, they cannot tell us because I want them to listen. I'm talking. I want you to understand what I'm saying. And the other part of that is understanding what I've said. Sometimes people will say, well, they're sort of nodding and I'll ask them, did they understand? And they'll say, yes. Do we really think they understand exactly what I'm asking? And that's where that questions part comes in, where we should ask them. And that could go something like, just so that I know that I've told you everything I think I've told you, can you just repeat back to me what I think I've told you? So I'm making myself the sort of fall guy. I'm not pointing and saying, I don't think you're listening to me.
Yeah.
I'm expressing, just so I think I've told you everything. Can you just repeat back to me? There's two parts there. One, they can repeat back to you some of the thing, or we're getting clarity. So what I meant was 12 o'clock, not 11 o'clock. So there's that part. But the other part is if the person cannot repeat back to us, that is confirmation they weren't listening. And that could be that they were thinking of other things. They're on their way to another meeting. They can only think about that. What we're starting to do at that point is condition them. Nobody wants to be caught with their pants down. And therefore, I'm asking them, they can't repeat back to me. It's, what are they going to do next time?
Yeah.
Next time I have a conversation, then what are they going to do?
Well, they're gonna be waiting for your questions, and which means probably they're going to be doing more active listening in relation to what you're saying.
We're conditioning them to listen. In terms of the time, I don't have time nowadays. Everybody's pushed for time. I have time for you going off and doing something, coming back a week later. Here we go. Here's the thing you asked me to do. Shit, that's not what I asked for. What I meant was wasted their time and mine. It's all about how am I utilizing my time, my most valuable commodity. I can't waste it anymore. We're being asked to do more and more, less people, less money, less resources, but we're still being asked to produce the same output, if not even greater. So the only way we can do that in the sort of law of accelerating returns is very much I need to create time. I need to get clarity. When I'm speaking, I want you to listen. When you're talking, I'm going to listen. You haven't got time to mess about anymore. You see it time and time again.
When you were talking there about, I think back to that storytelling thing again. I it's an easy thing to say. Everyone's got to be everyone's got to be a good storyteller. Well, some people are better at telling stories than other people for a start. Some people find it more natural. Some people find it difficult. But again, thinking back to giving that set of orders under the poncho, one of the big things of that, and you put a lot of time and effort into it, was making your model of the ground, right? It was, I mean, I was explaining this to somebody at work the other day. Little model kit. We all had our little model kits, bits of ribbon. I mean, you spent a lot of time and effort, didn't you? Like representing the ground you were going to be working on. I wonder if we spend enough time doing that as well within sort of organizations.
But what exactly were we trying to do with the model? What was the purpose of that?
Well, it was giving a representation of where we were going to execute the mission, wasn't it? To give people a bit of an idea of what we may find, what we might confront, where we may move around an objective. It had lots of different uses, I suppose, which looking back now, a lot of it was, I want to make a better model than the section commander. That's just...
Yeah, you wanted to get it on your command course, you wanted a better grade. But in terms, what you're bringing up is a very important point in terms of when we created those models, it was about clarity.
Yeah.
Understanding. And for I mentioned earlier on about the left of arc, right of arc, it would be a block of woods, for example. So not only were we seeing it on the map, a paper map, we can sort of see it visually. So it's further cementing in the soldier's mind, when I get to this point, this is going to happen. And then I'm going here. And then I know I'm going to meet up with so-and-so, or we're going to be guided to a certain point, and then we're sort of over the top whistle blast and for the stuff. But it's very much we are building, visualizing what is in front of us. And again, in terms of business, do we, going back to slide 1, slide 2, are we building the visual interpretation of where we want to go? What is it we want to do? Yes, it was in the medium of a sort of a scraping on the ground.
Yeah.
But that we can use other things. We can use schematics. We can use people PowerPoint to death with people nowadays. If we can create something so that people can see it. We're not just verbalizing it, utilizing all those senses. So we're talking about it and making them listen, and I'm making them see, observe. Going back to your OODA loop sort of thing. So all of these things are all interlinked, Mick, what we're talking about, but it's the basics of human sort of thing. You know, they've taken the sort of the most basic wooden top soldier and sort of going through a sequence so he understands where he's going, with who, with what equipment, and when he's coming home. Hopefully, we've got timing. One of the biggest things in the orders process is timings. And what's the last thing we always do in the orders process? If you can remember.
God, blimey, you're pushing me mind back. Yeah, synchronize your watch.
Time.
Yeah.
We are not specific enough in business and time. We are, come and see me on Friday with that report. When on Friday? 5 o'clock? You've got to be specific with people. People need clearer direction. That's what we work to. If I know what the end point is, you know, it's not like the sickener. You go up to the back of the Bedford and he drives off. You know, we know where the finish is. You know, we know where that is. Generally, in leading and management terms, we need to get better at being more specific with what we want from people, when we want it, and to what standard.
Yeah, the timing thing is an interesting thing from a be there 5 minutes before. That is a very ingrained thing in it. I mean, military people generally hate to be late, and that's because you were told, you know, parades at 8 o'clock, you were there 7:55 because you did not want to be late.
Yeah.
A very underestimated skill, I think.
Yeah. And I think that you hear stories of people that are unemployed or whatever in terms of, well, we should organize something so that at least they get used to getting out of bed and being somewhere at a certain time. But of course, in Norway, they push that down to 1 minute before. So it's in Norway is the 1 minute before. So you get a few extra 4 minutes to get ready. But again, the military is specific about timings. When you've got artillery back the way,
Yeah.
we know lots of stories in what we call the artillery along the way of drop shorts and whatever else. But again, it's all coordinated for the bigger picture. So, over it comes, then, the whistle goes, we're all over the top. And so, I think timing, being specific with timing, with individuals, purpose, objective. Why am I doing this? And we need to be clearer with individuals, which takes more time, but it saves more time in the future. Which, of course, the problem is with doing that, we're not able to quantify time saved in the future.
Yeah.
Obviously, in terms of the dimensions of time, we're not there yet. We don't know that we're going to save that time. So that puts a lot of people off to say, well, I'm saving time by doing this, by telling this person, being clear with this person. Basically, how do I know he understands or she understands? What do they, when they're telling me, do I understand what they're telling me? Or do I paraphrase what I understand? This is what I think you've just told me. Okay, I'm getting clarification. Oh, no, what I meant was. Okay, well, yeah, right. Okay, we're getting clarification in the here and now. We're not pushing it to next week.
Yeah.
How many meetings have you been to that have overrun or didn't get the answer to the question that you were all there to support? Constant.
The communication thing is obviously it's a big subject. Now, I know it's something you're passionate about. In our pre-chat, which really stuck in my head, is you mentioned about vibration. And I think it was in particular in relation to the vibration you would get from the horse. But even as you approached the horse and then when you were handling the equipment with the horse, that signal, because that's a very similar thing to how bees, that when bees are communicating, a lot of it is through vibration. So yeah, I don't know if you want to emphasize that anymore or just explain what you mean by that.
Yeah, again, this is the basics of maybe even survival going back thousands of years, that we sort of this sort of our vibration. We're all vibrating in some way. Animals, the same thing happens. So bees, over hundreds of thousands of years, they've been communicating through vibration and that frequency of the vibration. I think animals are still got it because they haven't had it beaten out of them by the education system. That they still communicate and have warning signs from vibration and the language of the bees in terms of the sort of setting, so everybody knows where to go and get the pollen. And therefore, it's the same. I think animals, as in the horse that I used to have, used for pulling wood out and bracken rolling on Exmoor. If you approached them in the morning and you weren't you weren't beating out that sort of frequency or that vibration, they knew, and they would give you a bit of a nudge and sort of playful sort of thing. Come on, it ain't so bad. We're here together. So I think that frequency and vibration, and there's huge amounts of studies about that in terms of where we are. And I saw something the other day about the Solfeggio scale in terms of frequency, which is a huge subject. And like the sun vibrates at around, I think it's 528 frequency or something, and that is reflected in music. Socrates and all these sort of people were using these frequencies to create things. And so I think we have lost the ability to pick up frequency and vibration. Now, let me give you an example. A number of years ago, I was going to a big consulting firm in London. So I think it was Chancery. I got off at Chancery sort of tube station. I was walking along Holborn, if anybody knows that sort of road along there. They have a particular point along there. They had all these boxes and these young sort of university types who were selling bits like Oxfam or sign up, give a bit of donation to this. And there were about 4 or 5 of them lined up, all different ones. Walked past, and I was going for the first sort of conversation with an organization, and I was a bit nervous, a bit worried about the outcome, etc. So I walk along the road, and my frequency and vibration at that particular point were pretty low. I wasn't sort of skipping along the road or anything.
Yeah.
So I walked past every one of these, and not one of them approached me. Not one. Meeting went very well. Went home. 2 weeks later, walking down the same road. This time I am skipping and singing sort of It's a Long Way to Tipperary. And every one approached me. And I believe I was pushing out that sort of frequency and vibration, which had a positive effect on them. And therefore, this is an approachable guy. And therefore tried to sell me something. But but I was too tight to sort of sign up for anything. But this is a simple example how our own frequency and vibration, when we're having a conversation with somebody, and we know it, we walk into a room sometimes and we hit it off, and you think, oh, this guy's on the same wavelength frequency. And we say these things, but we don't pay attention enough when we're speaking to people. There's a negative coming off this person. Are you all right? You're all right, Mick. I'm not quite sure what it is, but I'm getting a little feeling. Frequency and vibration. We had it thousands of years ago, hundreds of thousands of years ago. We knew when the saber-toothed tiger was outside waiting for us. We knew it. Now we've lost that ability. Animals retain it, and it's something we can sort of retrain ourselves to be aware of frequency of vibration in other people. It's a skill.
Yeah. So, sort of encompassing everything we've spoke about now, I think it's probably over a year ago, wouldn't it, when we saw each other, and then I think you said to me about I'm writing a children's book. I was like, oh, that's interesting. How on earth's Chris gone on to writing children's books? And then I've seen everything you've been doing around that. Again, you could say that's a form of communication, but I've been following what you've been doing with that. I've obviously bought the book. My kids absolutely loved it. I sent you a video of one of them when he finished it, saying how amazing he thought it was. I just think it's absolutely brilliant how you've got into doing that, mate. Yeah, so I don't know if you want to go into a little bit of detail how that came about.
I can, but tell him the £10 is on the way for sending that video. So, but actually, the Mickey Monroe books, which is the sort of brand of the learning and the book series, was not actually my first sort of foray into writing. I have got another story, which I think is an even better story, but it's a singular book, and I think would make a good film. But so while writing that, the coaching conversations were coming in, and a lot more things I was understanding and observing people. And some of the biggest sort of areas of coaching were communication, leading change, dealing with conflict, strategic thinking, and just all of these conversations. And I just woke up one day and thought, I'd love to do a children's book that can start this process of thinking. And I think that in terms of the sort of slogan, it's, raise a thinker, teaching young humans how to think, not what to think, is the sort of premise of it. So I've been writing for a while, secretly, just jotting sort of dumb shit down. And it makes me laugh. And I'm really sort of, my son sort of reads some of the bits and pieces and sort of checks me a bit. But when I try to write funny stories with a learning outcome with it, and as you know, I've included the discussion and thinking, which is I don't think anybody else does that in a children's book, where we review the previous chapter, but also bring into their awareness or consciousness about thinking about certain words that we used. So I think it's really a sort of encouraged by my son. I think he really liked the sort of concept when I pitched it to him. And it's about just bringing that fun part of learning and thinking of all the lessons from the coaching with adults, that just reinforcing it with children before they get it beaten out of them in the education system.
Yeah.
And so that's where I am. I've got in secret, I'm also writing a crime novel as well. I've got sort of something completely different, but that's that's for another day. And if Aussie John Osborne, if you're
Yeah.
Aussie, he's the detective. Detective Inspector John Osborne, if anybody knows him. Yeah, he's a great guy, Glaswegian. I've got a whole sort of genre of writing, and I think I told you now I'm sort of part-time coaching and part-time writing, so that's how I spend my time now. But there's
Yeah,
lots of
it's brilliant.
but teaching young humans how to think, not what to think, and I think that is really trying to sort of bring into their consciousness some of these words, how to communicate, how to ask questions, almost bringing a coaching style into their own sort of daily communication. That's the aim and objective of it.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to put links to all that stuff. I'm going to shout out and say, anyone go out and buy Chris's book on that, because it's fantastic. The thing that was brilliant when I got it is one of the things we've done with our twins since they were quite young is like, again, just at the end of the day when they were going to bed, we'd ask them like, oh, what's gone well, what didn't go so well, what could you do, a bit different tomorrow. It was like we were having those type of conversations. To see when you had written that book and there were chapters and then there were like reflection exercises at the end, just I thought, God, it's weird because when you see it, you think to yourself, why has nobody done this before?
Well,
But then I'm
yeah,
so glad you have.
that's where just ideas or knowledge and experiencing. Well, why can't we sort of share it with them? But also, and you raise a good point, things that you used to do this, or you do this for the children in terms of reflecting how, with your background, you're used to asking questions like that, where a lot of parents maybe don't know what to ask or not sure. And that's where in the book and the journals, I've included sort of questions so there's a parent sort of section that gives them the knowledge and questions to ask so that they can take part of the conversation and ask meaningful questions to facilitate the conversation. So it's not that for people that are not so confident or not too sure what to ask, there's some prompts there to help them along the way.
Where can people go, Chris, to find, where's the best way to sort of get in contact with you or follow what you're doing? You've got websites and all this type of stuff?
Yeah, I've got a website, but I did it myself. Okay, so just don't go sort of judging
That's
that.
all right.
But mickeymonroe.com, which is the brand name. So Mickey Monroe, just to sort of reiterate for everybody, is the 13-year-old tech-savvy genius, and he's working alongside his grandfather, who was a complete Luddite with the computers and sort of has a hammer close by and stuff. And of course, that is based on somebody Mick Jarwood, who technology sort of bites them in the ass every time and stuff. So he was the inspiration for that part of the story. So mickeymonroe.com is the website, and the email is think@mickeymonroe.com. And we're going to sort of continue with the book. So one you've already read, and your son's comment was there going to be another? Yes, there is, and there's going to be probably 3 in the series. So I pretty much mapped those out.
Well, we'll be on the early release on whatever site you get your books from. Before I ask the last question, I'm just going to ask something about the picture in the background.
My picture here?
Because it's interesting.
That's my very own Mondrain, which is a very famous artist. And when I this part of the sort of shed at the end of the garden wasn't open, and I had some chickens in here. And so I sort of evicted them and sort of encased this part of the sort of barn and sort of did the Mondrain there. Yeah. Yeah. So I always feel as though I've overdone it, though. You sort of start a Mondrain, you add little colors or lines here. I'd wish in hindsight, test and learn, I'd have done less is more.
There is no end to your talents, Chris.
It had to be straight lines, I'm afraid. You haven't seen a couple of stuff, but yeah, so that's a Mondrain. And the bit over the other side was I had a client that worked for Harrods in the interior design, and they'd seen the Mondrain and said, "Oh, I think why don't you think about doing a Mondrain style sort of wooden sort of bit at the back. So I've done that. I've got as far as I can with that at the moment. I'm not going to do any more there for the moment. So, yeah.
Brilliant.
So, yeah, I'm
Absolutely
up
brilliant.
the end of the garden, and that's where you'll find me most days.
So the last question is the same question I ask everybody. So from your perspective, what's the signal we're failing to see?
Obviously, I've listened to your other podcast, so I know you were going to ask me this, but I'm still sort of struggling. I think I'm going to just go back to that frequency and vibration. We are failing to see, feel what others around us, because it's such an important part of communication. We know animals communicate this way. And I think for us, if we can start incorporating that, how is this other person? What do I see in the other person? What am I feeling? And then also expressing what we're feeling. I'm feeling a little bit anxious. Mate. I'm not sure why this is. I think so. For me, we're not seeing or expressing frequency and vibration in everyday lives. We know it. We sort of subconsciously feel it. I would like people to be more conscious about the frequency and vibration around us and react to it. I think that's about it.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Chris, thanks for giving up your time to come into the Waggle Room. You've given brilliant answers, dialogue. It's like these things are always the same. We have some things we can sort of handrail, but I just love the fact that the conversation goes off in all different directions. I want to wish you all the luck with all the stuff you're doing, to be honest, mate, because I think it's been inspirational. When I look back to what we used to do in the military, the thing I find very, very interesting is like the ribbon we would have all got if we were saying we were doing these type of things when we were years ago. And now you're doing all this and I'm beekeeping and singing in a choir. And I'm thinking, God, I would never have told anyone that. But I think it's absolutely fantastic that we're all doing these other things now.
Yeah, I've seen, we certainly would you get crated for being on something like this. But no, it's been really great, Mick, and I'm really pleased that you've taken this on, and I understand and I know how much work it takes and effort and time. So I appreciate that, and I know that all of the listeners and viewers will appreciate that as it progresses. So best of luck.
Thanks, mate. They'll love this. Take care, mate.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.